Unprecedented wildfires in France and Spain have forced hundreds of thousands of people from their homes and are pushing firefighters to their limits. In this live stream, we'll talk to our correspondents on the ground and take your questions and comments as always, such as user Fabio Silva 3495 on YouTube, who is saying that Europe never had any control of these forest fires, these wildfires. If that is true, and we'll check with our correspondents if that is indeed the case, well, Europe better get its act together, if that is true, that is. Now, this is what firefighters and residents are up against in France. Let's begin with that country. These are images from Saint-Jean-de-Lac in the Giron region of southwest France. Now, this is the area that's west of Bordeaux. The wildfire here has been very unpredictable and sometimes has been its own self-feeding fire. You can see firefighters trying to sort of cool down the margins of that fire to prevent it from spreading. Similar scenes in Spain. A fire burning west of the capital, Madrid, has become the largest in the country. These are visuals from the various areas around Madrid. The fire has burned through some 500 square kilometers. That's 5 times the size of Barcelona. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez was weighing in on the situation and had this to say.
What we're experiencing is not a succession of isolated events. It's an expression of a climate emergency that is making wildfires more voracious, heat waves more frequent, and as a result, our country more vulnerable. This is no longer an exception. It's the new reality.
Meanwhile, in southwest France, some 220,000 people have been forced to flee their homes as the flames spread. French President Emmanuel Macron said his country faced an unprecedented emergency.
The situation is the most severe we have ever seen, the most severe since the Second World War. More than 160,000 hectares have already burned, and the summer season is far from over. We will win this battle together.
Well, that was French President Emmanuel Macron. As we promised to you earlier, we'll be going live to our correspondents, Rosie Brichard in France and Jean-Philippe Schulz in Spain. To you first, Rosie. We were chatting earlier. You said that you're near Lège-Cap-Ferret in the Gironde prefecture. What is the situation there?
Yeah, we're about 30 kilometres outside of Bordeaux. That's about 20 miles, and here you can see some of the firefighters are still trying to battle some of these active blazes. Let me show you a little bit of what is going on here. So that over there is a truck which is filling up water into these to allow the firefighters to go into that forest behind me where there are still some fires, not the most active ones, but we were told by the firefighters here not to go in there because the ground is too hot. That makes it dangerous. Now, this region is currently evacuated. We've been granted special access as press, but those that live in this region are some of the 200,000 plus people who can no longer access their homes. You might be able to see there in the distance, that is a kind of base camp for some of the volunteers who have come out in force to lend a hand to these firefighters. Most of what we've seen there is people coming with water. A lot of farmers have also mobilised in this bid to kind of support firefighters. And then follow me around here, Biresh, and you'll see over there the evidence of what some of this fire has left behind, which is acute destruction across this region. As French President Emmanuel Macron said, this is really seen as something unprecedented. We just heard a briefing from a French firefighting colonel who said this was like fighting David and Goliath fight. There has been another firefighter who lost their life overnight in this region, and we were told that when these firefighters are battling these blazes, they always have in mind those colleagues who were lost in this combat. And it really is the case that they are using the language of war here. They feel that they are in a kind of life or death battle with these flames. We've been told that for the moment this fire in this region is more stabilised than before, but that of course is very relative. And now there is a big concern about weather conditions because we are entering today another heat wave. Tomorrow, Wednesday, we are expecting temperatures of up to 40 degrees. That's about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And of course, that can only add fuel to these flames.
I mean, it's just stunning what you've been saying there, Rosie. Life and death situation, unprecedented. And which begs the question, at least for me, how are firefighters fighting and dealing with this unprecedented situation? What is their strategy here?
They have told us that they are kind of learning lessons from the far south of France. So one of the things we heard in a briefing of firefighters this morning was that in the past, these kind of forest fires were only happening right in the south of France. Now they're having to learn strategies from that from right across the country. One of the key things they're trying to improve is their aerial action and detection. So that is the planes that are going overhead. Just before we came on the air, we saw a helicopter overhead. The other thing they're doing is, of course, trying to coordinate more between themselves. We're seeing every day lots of different information flowing between different firefighting centres. Many of these firefighters, let's recall, are volunteers, and even those that are very professional have not battled like blazes like this one before. So, of course, they're learning a lot on the job here, but definitely that kind of having an emphasis on the aerial capacities is something we've heard they really want to improve in future. But, of course, the future now seems very far off. They are really in a day-to-day battle for the moment.
Rosie, stay on the line, because just for our viewers, I just want to give them a reference point as to where exactly you are. And I'd like to bring up this map from the European Forest Fire Information System. You all can log into it as well. Just Google and Google the EFFIS, and you'll find this map. And if the studio crew can just sort of take this map, there you go. That's the map I'm talking about. I'm going to just try and zoom into France here. This is basically all the red spots here, basically the active fires we're looking at. And this is the area of southwest France where Rosie is. That's where some of these fires are, and Bordeaux is somewhere nearabouts there. So just for reference, that's France over there. And we're talking about this particular region, southwest of France, which is where Rosie is reporting from. Rosie, back to you. You were talking about these water bombers and these helicopters that are trying to throw water on this huge wildfire. Are there enough of these planes? Are there enough of these helicopters? Are there enough firefighters to fight these blazes?
I think the very simple answer to that is no. We've even heard that from EU officials that say they acknowledge that the response so far has been insufficient. What I should say about some of these firefighting planes is that there is a backlog on some of the orders of the most advanced aircraft in terms of firefighting, so that's going to be really putting the spotlight on that. There is a lot of discussion here in France in terms of how budget has been allocated in recent years to civil protection, where there has been cuts. But also, when it comes to climate mitigation and adaptation measures, there is a very heated debate going on there, which I think will definitely pick up more in future. But one thing that is worth knowing is that France is not on its own here. There has been a wave of support and solidarity in very concrete terms from neighbouring countries. We've seen countries including Germany, Switzerland, sending in more firefighting planes and equipment, and even also firefighting teams. The EU is very keen to say that this is EU solidarity in action, and our colleagues who've been here reporting for days have heard from residents that they're grateful for this. But of course, above all in their minds, that they are seeing the destruction around them. Many of them may not know what kind of home they will be returning to. There already have been around 200 buildings which have been destroyed. But so of course the destruction is what's on their mind more than the solidarity, although the EU is very keen to highlight that other countries have come to France's aid here. You've been speaking to firefighters there on location, Rosie, and you also mentioned that a heat wave has been forecast. I think it's supposed to sort of begin today in France. What are they expecting will happen? Will this fire become worse before it is brought under control, given this new heat wave? There is a hope that perhaps some of the worst of this may have passed, but there is really no certainty on that whatsoever, because what happened in the last few days was that this fire became so intense, and the word the firefighters used to us was erratic, that it started essentially generating its own weather because of the kind of cloud that was whipped up by this enormous fire, and that made fighting this fire incredibly unpredictable. That is not the situation currently. They are in a less acute phase, but the fear is that with the return of a heat wave, so with much higher temperatures, that creates a much more difficult situation. What they have done to try and prepare for these very hot days is create massive fire breaks. That has included cutting down all sorts of trees and vegetation near to Bordeaux to try and contain this fire on the outskirts of the city so that it doesn't reach the city itself. So there is a sense of having put in the work for these very hot days, but the heat, and let me tell you already, it feels very hot here. You can feel the smoke in the air. That is making things much more complicated for these firefighters who have been, let's not forget, working for days, many of them with very, very little sleep. And just like any of us, when it's 40 degrees, when it's extremely hot, it's more difficult for anyone to work, and especially these firefighters that really feel they're in the kind of fight of their lives here.
These fires are to the west of the city of Bordeaux. What is the danger to Bordeaux?
So we've been told in a briefing just about an hour ago that they don't see any acute, immediate danger to the city of Bordeaux. That's because of these fire breaks that have been put in place. And it's really interesting to see, Biresh, we have been staying in Bordeaux, so when you're around the city itself, there isn't really a sense of panic. The air quality is not great, but it's really as you drive out into the outskirts, you very quickly feel it's in your lungs, okay, we've entered this fire zone. And there's much more of a focus on the outskirts of the city. Today, Tuesday, the main focus is an area where there are lots of tourist campsites. That's fresh evacuations have been ordered just in the last few hours. There are fears that in that neighbourhood called La Cano, that there could be a reignition of some of these fires. So that's where firefighters are putting their energy today, rather than looking toward Bordeaux itself in terms of the municipality. Just a reminder, viewers on TikTok and YouTube, you can write into the chat and send us your questions. Rosie's on site and she can try and answer some of those questions if you all have them. So do write in. Rosie, we were talking earlier about some upwards of 200,000 people being evacuated from that general area. Where have they been evacuated to? Are there reception centers that have been set up? Are they being housed in motels, stadiums? Where do you put 200,000 people? Good question, Biresh, and the answer is kind of all of the above. So there have been evacuation centres set up also in Bordeaux itself. Our colleagues have been there on the scene talking to people who've been evacuated, who are of course feeling very concerned about their properties, about their livelihoods in many cases. Other people are kind of organising locally. I spoke to some people who are posting online to say, look, if anyone needs a place to stay, I have a spare bedroom. So there has also been, and really worth noting here, this wave of solidarity among locals, especially from we've seen people coming out and just kind of with their, honestly, like watering cans, buckets of waters, anything they can find to try and get to those areas where the firefighters can't necessarily reach, because of course the firefighters have to concentrate on the most dangerous blazes. But yes, and in terms of evacuations, 2 centres, we've seen centres also set up in stadiums, but also kind of organised informally. And we did see the French president coming down to this region on Monday to send also a message of support. And he said, you know, these will be difficult days ahead, really trying to kind of motivate people here in this region, because this is not over yet. And how is this message of support being taken? Or rather received by people? Do they think that the government is there for them and providing them aid when they need it most, or do they think that the government should be doing more? Very mixed, I would say. There is definitely anger around here. I think many people feel that the preparations could have been done better. As I said, there's been a discussion about kind of where budget was allocated in the past. I think it is worth noting that these kind of events in the past would have been seen as extremely exceptional. But what's happening now is that the exceptional is becoming much more ordinary. It's only been a few years since we saw very big wildfires here in France. Then, back in 2022, they called it a mega fire. And what we heard from a French firefighting colonel this morning was that we might have to now kind of revise the definition of a mega fire, because what we've seen then has been totally outpaced by this forest fire, or these forest fires in the Giron region. And I think there definitely will be a lot of soul searching once the acute phase of this firefighting effort has passed. For now, it's still very much day to day. Is it too early to talk about timelines, Rosie, in terms of how long it will take for these fires
to be eventually put out, given that they are unprecedented and there never has been a wildfire like this in France since World War II?
Yes, it is too early, but what I can give you are some indications that in the past when we've had major wildfires, it takes months for them to be fully extinguished. That doesn't mean that people are evacuated in their hundreds of thousands for months at a time, but it's not really declared over until the very last ember has been extinguished. And that in itself can take a long time because, of course, whenever there is an increase in heat, whenever there are an uptake in winds, whenever there's a change in humidity, these can again create these conditions that can be very pyrogenic, that can allow fire to spread. So it is too early to talk of concrete timelines. We're still seeing more people being evacuated, but there's also some talk of some people returning in certain areas. So I think it's going to be much more like a patchwork of different people being able to access their houses in different places rather than a kind of blanket declaration of this fight being over, because the final declaration of the end of a forest fire, that is not something that happens in a matter of days. It may well be months.
Rosie, stay with us, but I'd like to just go to Spain, where our colleague Jan-Philippe Scholz is also standing by. I'd like to spend some time about what's happening in Spain with you, Jan-Philippe. As I understand, you're in Laval de Vico in the Valencia region in the east of Spain. Can you tell me what the situation there is?
Highly unstable. There are basically two big hotspots in Spain at the moment, in the area around Madrid and here in the area around Valencia. It's around 30-40 kilometers north of Valencia, to be precise, in the province of Castellón. And here firefighters have been able to use what they call a window of opportunity in the past 24 hours. The temperatures dropped a little bit, there was more humidity, and even some people that have been evacuated, and we are speaking about more than 10,000 people here that have been evacuated, almost 20,000, some of them have been able to return home. But everybody here, all the regional authorities stress that it's much too early to say that this fire is under control. Very similar to the situation in France, a lot of people fear the next heat wave coming, and this could be within the next 24 hours, temperatures way above 40 degrees, so this might worsen the situation again. At the moment, it's very unpredictable. More than 8,000 hectares have been destroyed, and the fire is not under control, but the firefighters have been able to install some fire breaks. They have been able to contain the fires in some areas, but when we went here, it's also all, of course, a no-go area. Just with our press cards, we could continue. We just see ghost towns behind me. You see a almost completely destroyed building. So nobody really knows what the next days will bring. The problem, especially here in the region of around Valencia, is also that it is a rural area, yes, but there are quite a few pueblos, as they say in Spain, villages or small towns around, even some industrial facilities. To the west, there's a big national park. So we have a very difficult terrain here, and people are quite worried that the worst might not be over yet.
Stay with us on the line, Jan-Philippe. I just want to show a map. If people can just grab the map that I have on my computer there. I'm just going to try and zoom in to illustrate what Jan-Philippe was talking about there. So this is Spain, and there's basically two major areas of fire. So that is around Madrid there, where when I'm moving the cursor. That's Madrid, the capital, and further east of that, around this area, is Valencia, and this is where Jan-Philippe is, further along the coast, and that is the fire that Jan-Philippe is talking about. Back to you, Jan-Philippe. We were listening to what Pedro Sanchez, the Prime Minister of Spain, was saying some time back. He was talking about climate change and that being a major catalyst behind these fires. But is it only down to climate change, or is there suspected arson as well behind some of these fires?
As always, there are many factors. Of course, climate change is a major factor. These extreme temperatures that we have been seeing here, it's a major factor. Also arson, yes. Authorities are almost 100% sure that this fire here is an intentional fire. This is a big problem. And then specifically in Spain, two more factors come in, and this is what people here have been discussing a lot. One is the phenomenon of what they call here España vacía. This means like empty Spain. In the past decades, a lot of people have left rural areas and moved to the cities. So a lot of agricultural areas have been abandoned. Forests could spread. This maybe sounds like something rather positive, that there's more forest now, but it also has its downsides, because more forests also means, of course, more fuel for the fires, and a lot of these forests have also been abandoned, not properly taken care of. And here is the other factor that has been discussed. Spain has been investing much less in preventional measures than other countries in Europe in the past years, even though it's obviously with France, Italy and other Mediterranean countries the worst affected area. So this is why when Prime Minister Sanchez is now talking about a national plan to fight the climate emergency, a lot of people agree, yes, but they also point out that definitely not enough has been done in the previous years, and the opposition says it's once again just empty words.
I mean, while you're talking, Jan-Philipp, you're showing our viewers visuals of the extent of the spread of the wildfires around the area where you are. We're looking at all these huge swathes of forest that are currently literally going up in smoke, large parts of them. A user, Zoomer.98 on YouTube, saying he or she feels pity for the wildlife in the forests. Jan-Philipp, you were talking earlier about upwards of about 20,000 people in the area where you are being evacuated. Where have they been taken to, and are they satisfied with the government response so far?
Well, yes and no. They have set up some temporary shelters where people have been able to spend the nights. A lot of people also went to their families in other regions of Spain. Also, similar to the situation in France, there is a lot of solidarity within the communities, people offering places to sleep, offering even their houses. In this region, a lot of people from other areas of Madrid, because we're close to beautiful beaches here, have like second homes for the summer. A lot of people are offering these places to the affected people. But there is also some complaints. There are also some complaints that communication is not spreading fast enough, that authorities are slow to communicate. But we have to point out that the emergency response this time is much better than about 2 years ago. Maybe some remember in this exact same region in Valencia there were huge floods, and back then the regional government was overwhelmed. The regional president had to step down because it was obvious that the emergency response did not work well. Of course, it's not so easy to compare floods with a wildfire, but in general there has been progress. This is something we can definitely say in the past years when it comes to emergency preparedness in the region.
We're talking about two main regions in Spain where there are these the threat of these wildfires, and these wildfires are currently raging. One is where you are on the eastern coast of Spain, around Valencia, and then of course further inland around Madrid, to the west of Madrid, there is another huge wildfire that is currently raging. Is there a difference between the two in the nature of the two wildfires, or are they essentially the same and they're being dealt with in the same way?
I think there are some similarities. In both cases, authorities assume that it's man-made, that it's intentional, or at least a man-made accident that is behind these fires, like in most cases when such wildfires break out. But of course there are also differences. The dimension in Madrid is much bigger. There we speak about the worst wildfire in the history of Spain. So this gives you an idea what we're talking about. It's more than 100,000, much more than 100,000 people affected in the region. But there, the situation at the moment, well, I wouldn't call it stable, but it has definitely progressed in the past 24 hours as well. But same situation in this regard as here, and also in southwestern France. This heat wave that is expected within the next 1 or 2 days is a big worry to everyone that that this could make this current situation much worse again.
You know, Jan-Philipp, I was talking to Rosie before I came to you, and I don't know how much of that conversation you picked up, but I was asking her about potential timelines, and if it's particularly too early at this stage to talk about a timeline as to when those wildfires in France, at least, can be brought under control. She said it was still too early to discuss that at the moment. Would you say that's the same situation with Spain as to how long it will eventually take to bring these unprecedented wildfires under control?
Unfortunately, I think it's also too early to speak about this here. I've asked a couple of local authorities, and nobody wants to say anything about it because it's just too difficult to make any informed prediction there.
Right.
So I guess it can take weeks, even months, but for the moment nobody will give you any concrete timeline.
Right. This live stream that we are running right now is under the title of whether Europe has lost control of its wildfires. Do you get the sense, talking to residents and talking to officials and firefighters who are dealing with these fires near you, that they have lost control of it, or they are just about managing to put a lid on it and keeping somehow to have some semblance of control, at least around the margins? What is the impression you get?
Well, I think there is some sense that the countries in the south of Europe are losing control, or at least they have to make huge efforts now not to lose control, to employ much more firefighters, to have better emergency preparedness plans. But similar also to the situation, I could follow what Rosie said in the beginning. It's the same feeling here. What used to be considered exceptional or a once in a decade wildfire is now something, it seems that we are experiencing something like this every year. So yes, it means that we cannot continue, especially here in Spain, one of the worst affected countries, as we have done for many years. There have to be new measures, new technology, new resources going into these authorities, especially the firefighters. Also some specialized military units that are helping, because it has been declared a national emergency here. So there's also military involved, a mix of regional and national resources. So all of this, especially here in Spain, the help by the national level to the regions, it has to improve massively, not to lose this control that we've been talking about.
Okay, Jan-Philipp, stay on the line, because I want to go back to Rosie Bouchard, who is in near Alège-Cap-Ferret in the Giron prefecture in the southwest of France. I don't know how much of the conversation you got between me and Jan-Philipp, Rosie, but then essentially I want to ask you the question that we have raised in our live stream as to whether Europe has lost control of its wildfires. Do you get a sense that French authorities have lost control of the wildfires in France?
They are insisting they have not lost control of it, that they have put plans in place and that they have reacted appropriately. That does not mean they do not acknowledge this is an enormous challenge that they are facing, and they are seeking more support and solidarity from other European countries. Some of those fire trucks you see behind me have come down from the north of France, for example, so we're seeing a mobilization right across the country. Yes, this will start an enormous political debate. I think especially you'll see from the right questions about security budget, from the left question of the political spectrum, that is, really questions about the budget that has been put into climate protection. That, I think, will be a debate which will come after the really intense phase of these fires. Right now, there's a real focus on the mobilisation, solidarity and getting the work done here day to day. Biraj, can I just pick up quickly on one of the comments from the users who spoke about the fate of wildlife in these forest fires? I want to just tell you that our colleagues here who've been on the ground for a few days have been reporting on that. They were yesterday with a couple who evacuate pets and animals that have been left and caught up in these wildfires, and they also told our colleagues that they are kind of overwhelmed. They are getting messages every day saying, this is my address, I had to leave, there are 2 cats inside, and they are breaking into these houses, rescuing these animals and taking them to an animal shelter. And if you want to take a look at that, if you have a look at DW's Instagram, TikTok, YouTube channels, you will find reporting especially on that aspect, on how they're dealing with the animals that have been caught up in this system as well.
Rosie, we'll leave it there for the moment. Rosie Bichard reporting there from Lèche Cap Ferret in the Giron prefecture in southwest France, and Jan-Philippe Scholz reporting from Laval de Quijo in the Valencia region in the east of Spain. Thanks, both of you, for your reporting on this. That's about it on this live stream for the moment. Before we close out, I just wanted to bring up a comment that we had from a user, Felipe, on TikTok, who was saying he posted something in Spanish, and the translation goes something along the lines of, humanity has a way of learning always in unexpected events. Maybe some good comes out of these wildfires, which are definitely challenging Europe at the moment. As Rosie was also saying, you can follow all the latest updates on our social media channels on Instagram, TikTok, dw.com, our website, and also on DW TV as well. Let us also know what you think beyond this live stream. Can Europe indeed bring these wildfires under control in a timely fashion? Are these wildfires the new normal, and what should be done about them? Let us know in the comments. For the moment, though, it's goodbye from me in Berlin. Bye-bye.